In the summer of 2022, Professor Renold was a keynote speaker at a virtual workshop organised by the Central South Consortium.
So this brings the presentation to a close. There are many more films linked to the professional learning programme that you will have access to via the CSE platform. But I just wanted to share with you the resources and the resource base, the evidence resource base that we have been kind of creating over the years. So some of the case studies, like making RSE webs, there are many more school case studies of getting started inside the Crash resource. So the Crash resource is a resource for practitioners. It shares our journey of professional learning with examples moving forward and resources such as like, how do I begin on a whole school approach to RSE? How do I map across all 6 AOLEs to ensure that the strand is explored across in a cross-curricular way, and other resources as well about different organisations that can support you moving forward.
One of the referenced organisations is Gendered Intelligence, whose head is trans-identified female Jay Stewart. In a TED talk titled "We Are Living on the Cusp of a Gendered Revolution," Stewart explains how he sees gender theory as liberating. Rejecting the claim made by Stonewall and others that gender identity is innate, Stewart returns to the claim made by Judith Butler that gender identity is created.
And this idea was taken by one of the greatest thinkers within gender theory, Judith Butler, who said there is no gender identity behind the expression of gender. So rather than I am already a gender that goes on to express that gender, the expression produces me as a gendered person. And in this is really, I think, interesting because we need to move away from a classification or a categorization of gender and into a space that allows for us to describe our gender expression.
In Stewart's worldview, rather than being innate, gender identity is more of an existentialist choice. Heather Brunskell-Evans comments, influenced by queer theory, in particular the work of Judith Butler, Stewart posits that the body has no intrinsic meaning. Rather, gender identity is a social phenomenon. Freedom lies in rejecting the heteronormative and gender-normative meanings attached to being female or male. A wellspring of possible gender identities then opens up for adoption by children, e.g. a genderqueer, genderfluid, agender, binary gender, etc. Stewart claims queer philosophy has brought about a new paradigm of thought about sex and gender, one tantamount to a scientific revolution, as described by the philosopher Thomas Kuhn. Applying this revolutionary knowledge to children and young people helps us to become more intelligent about gender in everyday settings and across wider society. Stewart explains the reason that she sought transition.
I am a trans man, which means I was assigned female at birth, raised as a girl, and then later on in my mid-20s, I came to a kind of a realisation that I felt more masculine and that actually the word man was more applicable to me.
Another significant concern is the use of RSE to push extreme gender ideology. Gender ideology is a belief system that claims that we all have an innate gender that may or may not align with our biological sex. Gender ideology claims that rather than sex being determined at conception and observed at birth, it is assigned at birth and that doctors sometimes get it wrong. Gender theory sadly has sexist and homophobic undertones, pushing outdated gender stereotypes and suggesting to same-sex attracted adolescents that instead of being gay or lesbian, they may in fact be the opposite sex. And gender theory says that if you feel like a woman, you are a woman, regardless of your chromosomes, your genitals, regardless, in fact, of reality. Now, gender ideology is highly contested. It doesn't have a basis in science, and no one had heard of it in this country just 10 years ago. And yet it's been pushed on children in some schools under the guise of RSE with what can only be described as a religious fervour. DfE guidance states that schools should not reinforce harmful stereotypes, for instance by suggesting that children might be a different gender. And resources used in teaching about this area must be evidence-based. And yet a video produced by the Amaze Group and used in schools suggests that boys who wear nail varnish or girls who like weightlifting might actually be the opposite sex. Resources by Brooke claim man and woman are genders. They are social ideas about how people who have vulvas and vaginas and people who have penises and testicles should behave. The Split Banana Group offers workshops to schools where children learn ideas of how gender is socially constructed and explore links between the gender binary and colonialism. A Gendered Intelligent Workshops tells children that a woman is still a woman, even if she enjoys getting blowjobs. Just Like Us tells children that their biological sex can be changed. The PSHE Association resources inform children that people whose gender matches the sex they were assigned at birth are described as cisgender. And gender theory is even being taught to our very youngest children. The Pop and Ollie group tells children that gender is male, female, both or neither. The Introducing Teddy book, aimed at primary school children, tells the story of Teddy, who changes sex, illustrated by the transformation of his bow tie into a hair bow. The Diversity Role Models primary training workshop uses the gender unicorn, a cartoon unicorn who explains that there is an additional biological sex category called other. Numerous resources from numerous sex education providers present gender theory as fact, contrary to DfE guidance. But it's not just factually incorrect resources that are making their way into schools. Visitors from external agencies are invited in to talk to children about sex and relationships, sometimes even without a teacher present in the room. Guidance says that when using external agencies, schools should check their material in advance and conduct a basic online search. But a social media search of organisations such as Diversity Role Models reveals links to drag queens with highly sexualised, porn-inspired names. Or in the case of mermaids, the promotion of political activism, which breaches political impartiality guidelines. In some cases, children are disadvantaged when they show signs of dissent from gender ideology, as we saw in the recent case reported in the press of a girl who was bullied out of school for questioning gender theory. I've spoken to parents of children who've been threatened with detention if they misgender a trans-identifying child, or who complain about the child of the opposite sex in their changing rooms. I've heard from parents whose child was marked down on their homework for not adhering to this new creed in their RSE work. Children believe what adults tell them. They're biologically programmed to do so. How else does a child learn the knowledge and the skills they need to grow and develop and be prepared for adult life? It's therefore the duty of those responsible for raising children, particularly parents and teachers, to tell children the truth. Those who teach a child that there are 64 different genders, that they may actually be a different gender to their birth sex, that they may have been born in the wrong body, are not telling the truth. And it's a tragedy that the RSE curriculum, which should be helping children to develop confidence and self-respect, is instead being used to undermine reality and ultimately put children in danger. Now, some may ask what harm is being done by presenting these ideas to children. And of course it is right to teach children to be tolerant, kind and accepting of others. But it's not compassionate, wise or legal to teach children that contested ideologies are fact. That's indoctrination, and it's becoming very evident that there are some quite concerning consequences.
In September 2022, Laura Ann Jones expressed concerns about the RSE curriculum. Miles stated that there was a public debate fomented by many who were keen to share misinformation.
Well, it is very important that young people in Wales are given an education which enables them to navigate the world in which we live and understand the challenges which young people face, which certainly I didn't face when I was at their age, and that is the underlying purpose and effect of the relationship and sexuality education code and guidance. The member will be very well aware that there is a public debate fomented by many who are keen to share misinformation in relation to the effect of the code and guidance, and I would have hoped that she might have been able to resist the temptation of lending weight to that misleading set of claims. The code is very clear, and in the way that she said in her question, is very specific about the limitations and restrictions and requirements which apply to the teaching of RSE at different developmental stages. I would invite any member, or indeed any member of the public with an interest in this area, to read the code itself and not to believe some of the claims that are being made about it. It's an area of great sensitivity, and I find it just implausible. The member claims that this is already something which she is concerned about. We are 2 weeks into the introduction of the new curriculum. So the material which is being talked about by some of the groups which are seeking to misrepresent the position simply is not the product of the Welsh education system. And I hope that she will find a way of distancing herself from those claims.
That same month, an article was published on the Institute of Welsh Affairs website. The article, titled "How Disinformation Arrived in Wales and Where It's Going Next," was co-authored by employees of Lynn Global, Adam Belcher and Stefan Rolnick. Stefan Rolnick joined Lynn Global from the Welsh Government, where he worked for the Office of the First Minister as a digital misinformation analyst. He joined Lynn Global in 2021. In August 2022, it was announced that Lynn Global had won a lucrative contract with the Welsh Government to deliver an integrated marketing campaign to support behaviour change around the reduction of speeds from 30 miles per hour to 20 miles per hour. The article stated, PCP, in particular its Welsh branch, PCP Wales, has a growing online presence, frequently using crowdfunding sites to fund their protests and raise awareness, and is deeply connected to the far right. The group utilises this to draw attention to their real-world organising and gain the support of other far-right online groups who share messages and advertise protests. There has been an increase in real-world action by PCP Wales, with the group being involved in anti-trans protests at drag queen story hours, protesting sex education in schools and coordinating events with lotuseaters.com, a far-right media portal. PCP, by incorporating narratives of children's vulnerability to sexual violence into their rhetoric, are borrowing from the very dangerous QAnon playbook. In November 2022, there was a judicial review of the RSE Code and Guidance brought by parents who were supported by Public Child Protection Wales. The case eventually went the way of the government, but in her summing up, the judge did confirm the responsibility of the government to respect the right of parents to ensure such education and teaching in conformity with their own religious and philosophical convictions. After the verdict, the Education Minister issued a written statement in which he stated, "I would like to put on record that I am appalled by the misinformation that has been purposefully spread by some campaigners and the additional pressure this has brought upon some schools and workforce. I want to say to our education workforce that we will support you and we thank you for the contribution you make to the lives of the children you teach." His statement was echoed by colleagues. In a blog post in March 2023 titled "Do the Little Things and Do the Big Things Too," Miles wrote, "So, in LGBT plus History Month, I am really proud to have introduced our LGBT plus inclusive relationship and sexuality education code. As a young gay man, the Tories' attempts to demonise people like me with Section 28 was one of the reasons I got into politics. We have brought in these changes despite an organised misinformation campaign involving hard right elements, and I promise you, I will stand up to them. I will never be deflected from our efforts to protect young people and help them to be safe and healthy." In an article written in July 2022, Adam Belcher, co-author of the hit piece on Public Child Protection Wales, describes some of these hard-right elements, including Matt Walsh's documentary, "What is a Woman?"
I'm a biological woman that medically transitioned to appear like a male. I will never be a man.
And so they go on the internet and they're told that all of their problems will be solved if they become a man.
So you worry that there could be a sort of social contagion element of this?
A teeny tiny bit, maybe.
It got me at 42. Your child doesn't have a chance.
And you're affirming it with hormones that have never been used in this way.
Puberty blockers, which are completely reversible.
Completely reversible.
One of the drugs used is Lupron, right? Which has actually been used to chemically castrate sex offenders.
You know what? I'm not sure that we should continue with this interview.
So you don't want to talk about the drugs that you give to kids, or?
How can they be removing the healthy breasts of 15-year-old girls?
There are masculine girls. There are feminine boys. What are we going to do about that? Carve them up?
Many parents have decided to homeschool. As Catherine says, they're my children, not Mark Drakeford's or Jeremy Miles's children.
Plant fi yw nhw, nid plant Mark Drakeford neu Jeremy Miles.